You ever walk away from a conversation feeling strangely drained, like your energy's been siphoned without a single raised voice? No insults, no threats. Just a smile, a nod, maybe even a laugh, but something doesn't sit right. That's the thing about real-world demons. They don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they sit across the dinner table. They wear familiar faces, and they slowly, methodically, drain the light out of your life without ever needing to raise their voice or show their claws. These people aren't always cruel in obvious ways. In fact, they're often charming, supportive even. But underneath the surface, they chip away at you, your confidence, your identity, your inner peace, until one day, you don't even recognize yourself anymore. And you wonder, how did I end up here? The Stoics warned us about this kind of quiet corrosion. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But what if those thoughts were slowly planted by someone else? Someone who benefits from your self-doubt, your hesitation, your silence? This video isn't about paranoia. It's about clarity. It's about recognizing the subtle tactics of psychological manipulators, not just the ones on the news or in movies, but the ones hidden in plain sight. Because in the real world, evil isn't always loud. Sometimes it's patient. So today, through the lens of Stoic wisdom, we're going to uncover 5 psychological signs that someone in your life might not be who they seem. Signs that a person you trust could actually be a hidden manipulator, not to scare you, but to arm you. And here's why this matters. When you know what to look for, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop absorbing blame that isn't yours. And you stop giving the best parts of yourself to people who only see you as a source of energy, not a human being. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like someone close to you only supports you conditionally? Like your success threatens them more than it inspires them? Or that somehow, no matter what you say or do, you end up feeling like the villain in your own story? That's not just a personality clash. That's manipulation through confusion, one of the oldest tactics in the book. Seneca, another great Stoic mind, taught us, "A man is as miserable as he thinks he is." But manipulators don't want you to realize that. They'd rather you remain uncertain, unsure whether the pain you feel is even real. Because when you're confused, you're controllable. And when you're always questioning yourself, you stop questioning them. But there's good news. Once you recognize the signs, you begin to reclaim your power. You no longer feel the need to win their approval or seek their validation. Instead, you begin to stand in a quiet confidence. You observe, you detach, you respond with clarity, rather than react in chaos. That's the Stoic way, and that's the goal of this video. Now, before we dive in, let's make something clear. Not every difficult person in your life is a manipulator. Life gets messy and people make mistakes. But patterns don't lie. And when these patterns show up consistently, when they chip away at your sense of self instead of building you up, it's time to pay attention. Because you deserve peace. You deserve to walk into your own home or your own mind without feeling under siege. So let this video serve as your compass. Not to judge others, but to protect yourself. Not to spread suspicion, but to build inner clarity. Because the Stoics didn't teach us to escape from the world. They taught us to see it clearly and to move through it with strength, calm, and wisdom. Let's begin. Here are 5 psychological signs someone close to you may be secretly manipulating you, even if they smile when they do it. Part 1. Emotional parasites. They drain, not support. Let's talk about a type of person you may never see coming. They don't break things. They don't shout. They don't raise red flags the way toxic people in movies do. Instead, They quietly drain your emotional battery, and the worst part is, they often do it with a smile. These are the emotional parasites, people who, without ever laying a hand on you, leave you feeling exhausted, foggy, confused, and deeply off balance. Every time you interact with them, you know the feeling. You were in a good mood before they arrived, clear-headed, focused, maybe even hopeful about something in your life. But after just an hour with them, it's like a cloud settles over your mind. You feel scattered, like you can't remember what you were working on, or even who you were trying to become. That's not a coincidence, it's a pattern. And it's one you need to start recognizing, because the cost of staying blind to it is your peace, your purpose, and sometimes even your identity. These emotional vampires don't always mean harm in the traditional sense. They're not necessarily evil. But their behavior? It's corrosive. They hijack conversations. No matter what you're going through, somehow the topic always loops back to them, their crisis, their drama, their need. And when you finally try to create space for yourself, they don't respond with respect. They respond with guilt. I thought you cared about me. I guess I know where I stand now, after everything I've done for you. Sound familiar? Here's the hard truth. Support doesn't drain you. Real connection doesn't leave you gasping for air. And kindness? True kindness. It has boundaries. The Stoics were clear on this. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, yet also one of the most thoughtful, once said, "You should not give your soul away so easily." Let that sink in. He didn't say, "Don't give your money away," or "Don't give your time away." He said your soul, the very core of who you are. Why? Because your emotional energy is sacred. It fuels your clarity, your creativity, your ability to show up strong for the people who actually care about your well-being. If someone is draining you constantly, if you walk away from them feeling diminished rather than uplifted, it's not selfish to protect your energy. It's essential. Think of your energy like a bank account. Every conversation, every interaction, every text or call, it's either a deposit or a withdrawal. Now ask yourself, after spending time with this person, am I richer or poorer? Here's a simple test. Try this next time you see them. Before the meeting, check in with yourself. Are you calm, present, energized? Now notice how you feel after, not just mentally, but physically. Do your shoulders tighten? Do you feel anxious or low? That reaction isn't in your head. It's your nervous system responding to emotional manipulation. It's your intuition sounding the alarm. And the Stoics believe deeply in listening to reason, but also to nature. Epictetus taught that we must never hand over the reins of our emotional life to someone else. Because when you do, you become a slave, not in chains, but in spirit. So what do we do about it? You don't need to cut everyone off. You don't need to become cold or heartless. But you do need boundaries. Firm, clear, calm boundaries. Protecting your energy doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It means you're no longer willing to be the emotional dumping ground for someone who refuses to grow. It means your presence is no longer free for people who see your attention as something to exploit rather than to respect. The next time someone pulls you into their emotional chaos, remember this. Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of clarity. And clarity requires space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to be fully yourself, without constantly being bent by someone else's storms. You don't owe access to everyone just because they're used to having it. Let your kindness be fierce. Let your love be real, but not limitless. because even the strongest light will flicker if it's never allowed to rest. So as we move forward in this video, I want you to carry this question with you. Who is fueling your soul, and who is feeding off it? Because how you answer that may just change everything. Part 2. Isolation through influence. Cutting you off. Now let's talk about a tactic that's as old as time, but often goes unnoticed until it's too late. It doesn't start with a confrontation. It doesn't begin with control. It begins with a whisper, a quiet comment that plants a seed of doubt. Your mom doesn't really respect your boundaries, does she? Your friends seem kind of jealous of you. Honestly, I don't think anyone really gets you, except me. And just like that, they start building a wall around you, one quiet brick at a time. This is not care, it's not love, it's strategic isolation. And it's one of the most subtle but dangerous forms of psychological manipulation. At first it feels like intimacy, like you've found someone who finally sees you, who's fully in your corner, who gets you like no one else ever has. They create this illusion, it's us against the world, but soon it starts to shift. You don't call your sister as often. You miss a few dinners with your old friends. You hesitate before sharing things with your mentor or parents because they wouldn't understand or might be biased. What you don't see in the moment is that your world is getting smaller and smaller until one day they become your only mirror. Your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions, all filtered through their approval, their validation, their worldview. And now, you're not just isolated, you're dependent. That's how influence replaces your support system. Not through force, but through quiet erosion. This tactic works because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like connection. But Stoic wisdom teaches us to examine connection with clarity, not just emotion. Epictetus once said, "Be content to be thought foolish by those who try to control you." And here's why that quote matters. When someone tries to isolate you, they'll often label any resistance as weakness, rebellion, or disloyalty. They might say, "Why are you being so defensive?" Or, "Wow, I guess your friends mean more to you than I do." They frame independence as betrayal. But the truth is this: healthy relationships expand your life. They encourage more love, not less, more connection, not confinement, more freedom, not fear. True closeness does not require you to cut ties with the people who raised you, loved you, laughed with you, or lifted you through hard seasons. If someone needs to isolate you to keep you, they don't love you. They fear losing control, and fear is no foundation for love. Now, this doesn't mean every suggestion to take space from someone is toxic. Sometimes, distance is healthy, but the difference is this: intent. Healthy people encourage discernment. Manipulators encourage dependence. Ask yourself, does this person celebrate the parts of you that existed before them? Do they support your other relationships, even if they don't personally benefit from them? Or do they slowly make you question everything and everyone that connects you to your identity? Because once your identity is untethered, they can reshape it. And that's the ultimate goal, not partnership, but possession. The Stoics teach us to stay rooted in what is ours, our reason, our clarity, our values. When someone tries to cut you off from the people who remind you of who you are, that's not love, that's control. And here's a powerful way to spot it. Do a quick audit of your relationships. Who have you stopped talking to since this person came into your life? Do you feel safe to speak freely around your own family or friends when they're present? Do you shrink or silence yourself to avoid conflict? If the answer is yes, it's time to step back and recenter, because you deserve connection that empowers you. not connection that cages you. One of the most dangerous beliefs a manipulator can sell you is, "I'm all you have." Because once you believe that, they've already won. But it's not true. You're not alone. You've never been alone. Even if you've been made to feel like your world is too messy, too broken, or too small to be loved, there are people who will meet you where you are without demanding you shut everyone else out. So here's what I want you to remember. You're allowed to have multiple sources of support. You're allowed to keep your friendships, your family ties, your passions, even if someone else finds them threatening. The person who truly loves you won't ask you to choose between them and your life. They'll want to be part of it. And if someone can only hold on to you by cutting off everything else that keeps you strong, then they were never strong enough to deserve you in the first place. As Epictetus reminded us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And freedom begins by recognizing when someone is trying to trap you in the name of love. So choose connection, but not at the cost of your soul. Choose closeness, but never in exchange for silence. And above all, choose to stay awake, because true manipulation only works when we fall asleep to what's really happening. Part 3. Gaslighting, the war on your sanity. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation. Not because it yells, not because it hits, but because it makes you question the one thing no one should ever be able to take from you, your own mind. This tactic is called gaslighting, and if you've experienced it, you know the damage runs deep, not just through what's said, but through what's denied, twisted, erased. You bring up something that hurt you, and the reply is instant. "That never happened. You're being too sensitive. Wow, you really remember things wrong." And just like that, a simple conversation becomes a battlefield, not of facts, but of sanity. Here's the trick. Gaslighting doesn't work by overpowering you. It works by making you doubt yourself, little by little. You start to wonder, did I actually say that? Maybe I am being dramatic. Maybe I do remember it wrong. And eventually, you stop trusting your own memory, your instincts, your perception of reality. You apologize, even when you were right, just to keep the peace. But here's what the Stoics would want you to know. Peace built on lies is not peace at all. It's imprisonment. Gaslighting is psychological warfare. And the target isn't the argument. It's you. Not your logic, not your points, but your confidence in seeing what you saw and feeling what you felt. And that's what makes it so devastating. You lose faith, not just in the other person, but in yourself. Think about it. How can you stand up for yourself when you're not even sure what's real anymore? How do you set boundaries when every time you do, they tell you you're being irrational, emotional, or crazy? But you are not crazy. You are being manipulated. And there's a reason this tactic is so common among abusers, narcissists, and control freaks. Because it keeps you quiet. It makes you easier to control, not through fear, but through confusion. And as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, we are not disturbed by things, but by the view we take of them. But what if that view has been warped by someone who benefits from your disorientation? That's why the Stoics didn't just teach awareness, they taught practice. And one of the most powerful tools in this battle for your clarity is a private journal. Now you might be thinking, seriously, a journal? Yes. Because when someone is trying to rewrite your memories, your words, your emotions, you need a record. Not for revenge. Not to prove them wrong, but to anchor yourself in the truth. Write it down. What happened, how you felt, what was said, what was denied. Because when someone is working to erase your version of events, your journal becomes a lifeline, not to dwell on pain, but to preserve your reality. Gaslighting thrives in silence. It wins when you start to doubt your own voice. But every word you write down, that's your voice finding its footing again. This is not about playing detective or storing ammo for a fight. It's about reclaiming your inner compass. And here's the deeper Stoic lesson. You cannot always control how others twist reality, but you can choose to remain grounded in what you've experienced. Even if no one else validates it, you can, because you saw what you saw. You felt what you felt, and your story matters, even if someone else desperately wants to erase it. Now, I want you to reflect on this. Have you ever found yourself apologizing for overreacting, even when the pain was real? Have you been told you're imagining things just because you remembered what they wanted you to forget? If so, take a step back, not in fear, but in clarity. You are not the problem, but you might be in a relationship where truth itself has become the enemy, and that is no place for growth. That is no place for peace. Real love doesn't gaslight. Real friendship doesn't rewrite history to win an argument. And real connection doesn't weaponize confusion to silence someone's truth. If someone only feels safe when you feel unstable, that is not a relationship. That is control in disguise. And you deserve better. You deserve connection that strengthens your mind, not clouds it. You deserve a space where you can feel something and not be shamed for it. And most importantly, you deserve to trust yourself again. So start today. Pick up that journal. Write down your truth, not for anyone else, but for you. Because the longer you stay silent, the louder their voice becomes inside your head. But the moment you speak, even if only on paper, your own voice begins to return. And that voice, that's your power. Don't let anyone talk you out of your own reality. Part 4. Two-faced manipulators, the mask of kindness. Some people wear masks so well, you forget they're wearing one at all. To the world, they're charming. Polite, helpful, maybe even admired. They know the right words to say, the right gestures to make, the perfect smile to wear in front of an audience. But when the door closes, when no one's watching, something changes. Their tone sharpens. Their warmth disappears, and the person who once made you feel seen now makes you feel small. Welcome to the world of the two-faced manipulator, the one who keeps you guessing, keeps you off balance, and worst of all, keeps you hoping. You see, this kind of manipulator doesn't operate through consistent cruelty. They don't always yell, belittle, or isolate, at least not all the time. Instead, they use a much more effective weapon: intermittent reinforcement. One moment, they flood you with affection. They compliment you, show affection, maybe even make grand gestures of love or loyalty. And just when your guard drops the next moment, they withhold it. They criticize. They grow distant, cold, harsh. And you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? Was it something I said? Something I missed? How can I get them to be warm again, like they were before? And that's the trap. You stop asking if their behavior is right, and start asking what you need to do to earn their approval again. It's not love, it's conditioning. Like a slot machine, they reward you just often enough to keep you pulling the lever, hoping for that emotional jackpot that never quite comes. And you become addicted, not to the person themselves, but to the hope that they'll finally give you the consistency you crave. But they never do. Because if they did, you'd stop chasing it. Let me ask you, have you ever found yourself defending someone by saying, "But they're not always like this," or clinging to those rare good moments as proof that things aren't as bad as they feel? That's the power of the mask. And it's designed to make you question your gut, to doubt your instincts, to confuse inconsistency with complexity. But the Stoics saw through that kind of illusion long ago. Seneca, Roman philosopher, statesman, and mentor to emperors, wrote, "A wise man is always the same." That's not to say he's never emotional or never upset. But his character, his values, remain steady, whether in public or private. In other words, virtue doesn't wear a mask. It doesn't need to. Real character is consistent. It doesn't shift with the setting or depend on whether someone's watching. So when someone treats you with kindness, only when it benefits their image, but devalues you behind closed doors, that's not kindness. That's strategy. And you deserve better. You deserve people whose warmth isn't a performance, whose love isn't a tool, whose version of you doesn't shift based on their mood or their audience. Two-faced manipulators rely on the illusion that they're basically good people. They want you to believe that the cold version of them is just stress, or a bad day, or you being too sensitive. But here's the truth. The Stoics would want you to remember. A person's truest self is revealed not when life is easy, but when it's hard. Not when the camera's on, but when no one's watching. So if someone consistently treats you with disrespect, indifference, or cruelty when the world isn't looking, that is who they are. No matter how kind they are to waiters, no matter how charming they seem at family dinners, no matter how loudly they proclaim to love you. Here's a Stoic perspective you can use to check the health of a relationship. Ask yourself, do I feel safe being fully myself with this person? Not perfect, not polished, just human. Do you feel emotionally steady around them? Or are you always bracing for the shift, always walking on eggshells, trying to manage their moods? If so, it's time to step back, not in anger, but in clarity. Because you weren't made to live in emotional chaos. You weren't born to earn the right to be treated with basic respect. You're allowed to walk away from confusion, even if others call it giving up. You're allowed to demand consistency, even if it makes someone uncomfortable. And you're allowed to stop explaining someone's bad behavior just because they're nice to strangers. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." That's the standard. Not perfection, but integrity. Not flawless charm, but steadfast character. So if someone keeps switching masks, one for the world, one for you, don't waste your energy trying to guess which is real. Instead, protect your peace. Because while masks may fool the world, your soul always knows the difference. Part 5. Subtle sabotage. Rewriting your identity. Sometimes the most dangerous kind of sabotage doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from someone who claims to care about you. From a voice that sounds familiar, that feels like love, but slowly makes you question who you are, until you start dimming your own light just to make them more comfortable. They don't yell. They don't forbid you from dreaming. No, their weapon of choice is far more subtle. It starts with a sentence like, "Just be realistic. That's not really your strength. I'm just being honest. You're not really cut out for that." And suddenly, the spark that once lit up your whole being begins to flicker. Not because it ran out of fuel, but because someone kept pouring water on it, with a smile. This is what I call subtle sabotage. The quiet dismantling of your identity in the name of concern, honesty, or even love. They mock your joy. They roll their eyes at your passion. They tell you that your goals are too much, your ambition is too loud, your authenticity is too inconvenient, and over time, you shrink. Not all at once, not dramatically, but bit by bit, day by day. Until one morning, you look in the mirror and ask yourself, what happened to me? You used to be bold. You used to laugh louder. You used to believe in possibilities that now feel childish, reckless, or naive. But maybe those dreams weren't the problem. Maybe it was the voice that told you to bury them. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a difference between honest feedback and emotional erosion. Real friends offer truth, yes, but they do it with care, with context, with timing. They speak into your potential, not just your fears. They build you, they don't blur you. But manipulators? They disguise corrosion as clarity, and slowly, they convince you to edit yourself until what's left is quiet, safe, and small enough to no longer threaten them. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes a powerful shield. Epictetus once said, "Do not trade your nature for their approval." Read that again. Do not trade your nature for their approval. Your nature, your joy, your voice, your boldness is not a problem to be solved. It's your soul's fingerprint, and no one, not a partner, not a parent, not a friend, has the right to rewrite it just to make you more manageable. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stopped doing something you loved because someone made you feel silly for enjoying it? Have you ever watered down your ideas, your opinions, or even your presence just to avoid hearing, "Calm down," or "You're too much"? If so, this isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. Because subtle sabotage doesn't feel like sabotage when it's wrapped in politeness. It feels like love with strings attached. It feels like approval that has to be earned by becoming someone you're not. But here's what the Stoics would tell you. You were not born to be edited. Your dreams don't need permission. Your laughter doesn't need to be toned down. And your vision doesn't need to fit in someone else's frame of realistic. The truth is, people who love you will want to see you rise, not shrink. They'll celebrate your uniqueness, even when it stretches their comfort zone. And those who feel threatened by your growth? They're revealing more about their own limitations than about your potential. So how do you reclaim what was stolen? You start by remembering who you were before the doubt crept in. You revisit the hobbies, passions, and goals that made you feel alive, not just accepted. You give yourself permission to be loud again, creative again, courageous again. You do the things they said you couldn't. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that they were never your compass to begin with. And you write this truth on your heart. Your identity is not a group project. It's not something to be revised every time someone's uncomfortable. It's not negotiable just because someone finds your confidence inconvenient. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to be unapologetically yourself, even if someone calls that selfish. Because shrinking doesn't make you humble. It makes you disappear. And the world doesn't need another muted soul. It needs the real you. So if someone has tried to reshape you into a version that feels easier for them to handle, take a step back. Not in anger, but in clarity. Because from this moment forward, you don't have to live under their limits. You don't have to filter your joy, second-guess your gut, or apologize for being passionate. You were never too much. They were simply not enough to handle the fullness of you. So rise. Reignite the dreams they laughed at. Speak the words you swallowed. Be the person you were always meant to be, before subtle sabotage convinced you that your light was too bright. And when in doubt, return to Epictetus. Do not trade your nature for their approval. Your nature is your power, and it's time to own it. Now that we've walked through the patterns, the draining, the isolation, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the subtle sabotage, you might be feeling a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, clarity, relief. But here's the truth no one tells you right away. These people, they're not monsters, they're masks. And that's what makes it so hard to walk away. Not just from them, but from the idea of them. Because what you're grieving isn't the reality of who they were. You're grieving who you thought they were. The kind version. The charming version. The early days when it felt like they saw the real you. But eventually, you realize that person, the one you kept trying to reach again, was never actually there. It was a performance. A mask perfectly molded to your hopes, your wounds, and your needs. And the hardest part of healing is accepting that what you missed never truly existed. Not in the way you believed, but that realization. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of freedom. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers and Roman emperors, wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That line has carried many people, including me, through dark, confusing seasons. Because when someone tries to break you down, when they chip away at your self-worth, your clarity, your identity, it doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning. The obstacle is the path. The pain is the teacher. The silence they forced on you can become your greatest source of insight and strength. You don't need revenge. You don't need to make them understand. And you definitely don't need to keep rehearsing conversations in your head, wondering what you should have said. What you need is a return to your core. So here's your Stoic call to action. Protect your energy. Not by building walls, but by building wisdom. You're not fragile. You're focused. And that focus deserves to be guarded. Rebuild your boundaries. Not to shut people out, but to keep your soul intact. You are not obligated to explain your peace to people who thrive in chaos. Reclaim your identity, not the edited version that made them comfortable, but the full, vibrant, deeply human version of you that was there before the manipulation ever began. And finally, share the wisdom. Because for every person who is broken free, there are 10 more still under the spell. Still doubting themselves, still apologizing for their reactions, still confusing emotional whiplash with love. You never know who's watching you silently. Who needs to hear that they're not crazy, not weak, and definitely not alone. Let your healing be loud. Let your clarity be contagious. Let your voice become the permission someone else is waiting for. And when in doubt, return to what the Stoics always knew. You cannot control the masks others choose to wear, but you can choose never to wear one yourself. You can live in truth. You can walk in clarity. You can love without losing yourself. And you can rise every single time, stronger, wiser, and quieter than before. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is rebuilding yourself so deeply that not even the memory of them can shake you. If this video spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button if you're reclaiming your energy. Subscribe if you're choosing clarity over confusion. And share this with someone who might still be stuck in the fog, because one video can be the spark that brings them back to themselves. Remember, healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet decision, made in silence, fueled by truth, and repeated daily with courage. Thank you for watching. And thank you for choosing the Stoic path, not just of surviving, but rising. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, protect your peace, reclaim your power, walk tall.